Welcome everyone to Over 50, So What? I'm Carol O'Halloran. George Burns said you can't help getting older, but you don't have to get old. And that's what this show is all about, trying new things and having fun. Today we're chatting with Jodie Atkinson about how to process grief and the myths around what you should or shouldn't do. Then time to get active, whether you're sitting, standing or moving in the 5-minute fun fitness. And lastly, we meet some mature age people, definitely proving you don't have to get old. We have men and women up to the age of 85, up in the treetops, on the high ropes. Even I did it. It was really scary at the beginning, climbing up the pole. But the view from the top was amazing. Most of us over 50 will have experienced the loss of a loved one. I still remember the first time it happened to me. I thought I was prepared, but nothing quite prepared me for the unexpected ways I would be affected. Today we're chatting with Jodie Atkinson, grief recovery specialist and author of Have You Met My Grief? Jodie, welcome back to Over 50 So What? Last time we had you on the show, you gave us a great sort of overview of your journey. Now, we didn't really talk about your work as a grief recovery specialist. What does a grief recovery specialist do?
The process that I take someone through with grief recovery method is an education. And what we do is go to the root of the emotions and what's going on around that, rather than looking at how we might feel when we feel a certain way and how we can overcome that feeling. What is that feeling and what is it trying to tell us? So it is about taking actions and making choices through a step-by-step process in order to work through our loss and help people to move beyond the pain of loss, and reconnect to the person in a way that is freed up from, I guess, a lot of the painful memories and a lot of the painful emotions that they may be experiencing.
So previously we discussed that everyone has a different experience with grief, and basically it's just about letting what happens and being kind to yourself. Is that right?
Yes, being kind to yourself. Don't judge yourself. Like if you find yourself, I felt like I became very aware that I was noticing things about myself that were different. Like, interesting that I'm making these choices. Oh, look at you behaving like that. That's unusual for you. I just started to notice things about myself. And rather than judge myself, I was just curious about why I was feeling that way and experiencing that. And, grief, it does change you. Learning to lean into it, which is easier said than done, enables you to have that sense of, I just need to learn to take time out for myself. I need to put these boundaries in place for me and take care of myself.
Are there any misconceptions around grief? I think we discussed it briefly before about other people approaching you. What are some of the myths and misconceptions about losing someone?
So through the grief recovery method, we look at myths of grief. So quite often you'll hear someone say, be strong. Actually, we don't have to be strong. We don't have to feel strong, and we certainly don't have to be strong for others. Another one would be grieving alone. You know the saying about smile and the world smiles with you, or grieve and you grieve alone. Not everybody feels safe to be in isolation when they're grieving. Some people may feel they need to pull back occasionally, but not everyone wants to be left alone. One we often hear is give it time, or time is a healer. We don't tell people with a broken arm to just go and give it time, do we? We tend to tell them that they need to go and seek medical attention or some support with that. When we're dealing with grief, it's an internal thing. We can't see it, but it is something that still needs to have attention. Quite often people will be told not to feel bad or not to feel sad about what's happened. And the reality is people are going to feel how they're going to feel. You telling them not to cry doesn't mean they won't cry. Telling them not to feel bad doesn't mean they're not going to feel bad. Their feelings are what they are experiencing. They're real, they're raw, they're valid. And I think the other big thing is quite often replacing the loss, especially around pet loss. You can get another dog or you can replace, pets, but it's really hard to replace a human. As a young widow, I was told, look, you'll meet someone new one day. And it's just like the last thing on your mind is meeting someone new when you're dealing with the loss of, your significant other, in my case, the love of my life. A lot of these comments are very minimizing of the emotions that the person who's grieving is experiencing, and minimizing of the person potentially that they've lost as well. I came up with 4 sentences that I felt helped me extract myself from conversations and situations I didn't want to be part of. That's not how I feel. That's not what I think. That's not what I believe. And that's not my experience. And that sort of put a stop to people projecting toward me, and being able to put that boundary in place in order to stop that conversation from happening. But it was also gentle enough that it wasn't going to be offensive to them either. Like, there's that weird line that you feel responsible for hurting other people's feelings while you're at a really emotional, vulnerable state yourself. And it's really hard. So learning ways in which to communicate how you're feeling and getting that across, that's something that I'm really passionate about, actually, is when you're in that state, you're not really in a position to be thinking about, how do I manage this in the best possible way, or what can I say? So that's something that I want to bring to this space.
So tell us about your book, Have You Met My Grief? And did that help you with your own grieving process?
Yes, it did, in a way. Like, it was nice to be able to put onto paper a lot of stuff. There's a section at the end of each chapter on tips and things that we've covered, because when you're emotional, and with grief in particular, your concentration's not great. You don't retain information. So the chapters are short. It's not meant to be War and Peace. People who are grieving cannot possibly have a big document to work through. So it is designed for people who are struggling with lack of concentration, feeling a bit foggy. It's written so that it's easy to follow and put down and pick up when you need to.
Now, you also offer a 15-minute phone call, a free phone call for people to chat to you about navigating their grief. Can you tell us how you work with people and what that's all about?
So that 15 minutes is really just for them to sort of find out what I do, because grief recovery specialist or grief recovery method isn't something that everybody's heard of. So I go through that with them. And it's also an opportunity to get to know their story a little bit, and where I can help them and what I can offer. We do spend a bit of time unlearning some of the things that we've learned through society, through those myths of grief, those unhelpful platitudes and things that people often tell us. And it's about unlearning those things so that we can learn how to communicate and how to navigate our loss, and how to work through putting down emotional rocks that we carry, rather than just shifting them to different pockets and different parts of the emotional backpack that we might be carrying. So it's actually about getting underneath all of that stuff and finding out when people say, I'm feeling, quite often the hand is on the chest. Rarely is it up here going, I feel this way. So going to the root of the problem, using the emotions, the heart, to resolve those things, rather than intellectualizing our feelings and our grief.
Well, thank you so much for our chat today, and that great idea of yours about when you want to help the other person deal with your grief, because otherwise you'd be scrambling around trying to find out what to say. But giving them, someone a tool when they're in that emotional state of what to say to other people, that is fantastic. Thank you so much, Jodie.
Thank you, Carol.
Thanks for watching our TV show. Be sure to hit subscribe, and then you'll never miss an episode. Jump on Facebook, join our group, get in on the fun, fitness, wellness and inspiration. I'm Carol, over 50. So what?